In these parts of Spain, you can still buy a townhouse for the price of a laptop. It sounds impossible, but these are real towns with real streets, real neighbors, and histories stretching back centuries. Their prices come from quiet realities, shrinking populations, slow local economies, and homes that need patient renovation. Yet each place has something unmistakably Spanish: morning light over old stone plazas, endurance festivals that have survived generations, landscapes that feel untouched, and a pace of life you only notice once you finally slow down. Today, we'll explore 10 towns where Spain is still affordable, and the number one pick will shock you the most. If this kind of deep dive helps you map your next adventure, feel free to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. Raytordo, mist, moss, and old stone, and a soft layer of fog drifts across these hills almost every morning, making the stone walls and mossy paths feel centuries old. It's the kind of quiet that slows your breathing on its own. Set in rural Galicia, Raytordo sits among forest-covered slopes, small farms, and winding streams. You'll see stone bridges, tiny hamlets with only a handful of neighbors, and narrow lanes where life moves at walking speed. It's a place where you hear cowbells before you see the cows. The town, also known for its ancient ironworking traditions, and dozens of old stone watermills hide along the riverbanks, some dating back centuries. Homes here can still be shockingly cheap, usually $5,000 to $7,000 for an old stone house. Rent averages around $350, and the cost of living is roughly 15% lower than the national average. If you can hear the river, the day will be peaceful, an older farmer told me. Cool summers, deep forests for quiet walks, friendly neighbors, and a feeling of breathing room that's hard to find elsewhere. It's safe, unhurried, and surprisingly soothing. But expect long rainy months, very few local jobs, slow roads, and rural internet that sometimes fades without warning. From here, just beyond these wet green hills, a sunnier place waits with a completely different rhythm. Almudena de la Plata, white walls under hot skies. Almudena de la Plata wakes up slow, almost glowing. Early sunlight hits the white walls so hard they look polished, and the air already carries that warm Andalusian promise. This little town sits in the Sierra Norte of Seville, where soft mountains, scrubby oaks, and narrow lanes create a rhythm that feels older than the map itself. Long before this was a quiet village, the Romans were here digging silver out of the hills. They built rough paths to move the metal, and those paths eventually became part of the Via de la Plata. Back then, it carried soldiers and traders. Today, you'll still see hikers and pilgrims following those old markers through the warm, open valleys. Homes here are among the cheapest in southern Spain. Small countryside houses often list between $5,000 and $8,500, enough to buy a used scooter back in the US. With a population of about 1,600, monthly rents hover near $380, and daily expenses sit roughly 10% below the national average. We measure time by the shade, not the clock, a shopkeeper tells visitors, pointing at the shifting light across the plaza. Life is warm and simple. Dusty hiking trails, strong coffee in tiny cafes, and neighbors who greet you before you speak. But summers can feel heavy. Buses are rare and work options lean toward agriculture. Keep moving north, and the landscape cools into a quieter world with a very different kind of bargain. Val del Agua del Cerro echoes in an almost empty valley. Val del Agua del Cerro feels like a place paused in time. When you walk in, the air is so still you almost hear your own footsteps bouncing between the two low hills that guard the valley. The village sits in one of the quietest corners of Soria, surrounded by pale fields, abandoned stone walls, and long afternoons where nothing rushes you. This tiny place was once a busy farm village, with goats in the lanes and families working the fields. But in the late 1900s, most people moved to bigger cities, leaving behind stone houses that slowly fell quiet. Today, you can still see roofless barns, old grain rooms, and narrow streets that researchers visit to study Spain's empty interior. With just 25 residents left, some homes are so abandoned that the town offers them for free, while others list no more than $5,000, but it usually need full repairs. Just be prepared. Rent is basically symbolic, and the cost of living runs about 20% below the national average. "We hear the wind more than people," one of the last neighbors tells visitors. The biggest drawbacks show up right away. It's deeply isolated. The nearest grocery store can be a long drive, and real jobs are basically non-existent. But if you can live with that, the rewards are worth it. You get total peace, no traffic at all, no crowds, and a slow, safe rhythm of life that feels completely removed from modern noise. Keep climbing toward the higher mountains, and the silence shifts, less empty, more wild, and surprisingly beautiful. Oseja de Sajambre, a bowl of peaks and cloud trails. If you want a town that feels held in the hands of the mountains, Oseja de Sajambre is exactly that. The cliffs rise so close around you that the sky looks like a small blue lid, and early clouds slide across the rock like slow-moving smoke. It's tucked deep inside the Picos de Europa National Park, where the air feels sharp, clean, and almost cold even in July. For centuries, this valley was crossed by shepherds guiding their livestock along old transhumance routes, climbing through passes that look untouched today. You can still see stone markers and tiny grazing shelters scattered across the hillsides. With a population of around 250, small stone houses often sell for $5,000 to $9,000, especially the older ones that need repairs. Rent sits near $400, and the cost of living stays about 12% below the national average. Up here, the mountains decide your plans, a local guide likes to say, and he's not wrong. Winters here ask a bit more from you. The cold settles in early, the roads wind like ribbons, and even a grocery run needs some planning. But once spring arrives, the whole valley feels like a reward. Cool summers, clear mountain air, long hiking paths that disappear into the cliffs, and village traditions that still guide the rhythm of daily life. Head back toward the coast, and the next town greets you with history carved directly into its streets. Mondoñedo, bells, stone, and old cathedrals. In the morning, Mondoñedo greets you with soft echoes, the sound of shoes on old stone and church bells drifting over the valley like a slow wave. The town sits in a green Galician hollow, surrounded by rolling hills, cool air, and medieval streets that still feel lived in rather than staged. Small bakeries, stone fountains, and shady plazas give it a warm, everyday charm. History is everywhere here. The 13th century cathedral rises at the center like a carved gray mountain, and old pilgrim paths from the Camino del Norte still run straight through town. You'll see scallop shells on doorways and even a few walkers passing with backpacks and walking sticks. With a population of about 3,500, rundown stone homes can list for just $5,000 to $12,000, often tucked into narrow lanes or next to garden plots. Rent averages around $420, and the cost of living stays roughly 10% below the Spanish average. Here, history isn't something you visit, it's something you walk through, one resident says. Life moves slowly, with mild weather, good food, and more services than most rural towns. But the pace can feel slow for some. Paperwork is famously sluggish, the population skews older, and nightlife is almost non-existent. Head inland again, and the valley widens into open fields where life shifts with the seasons. Villalpando, wheat, old walls, and open sky. Villalpando is one of those towns where the moment you arrive, everything just softens. The air feels bigger. The sky feels wider. You're surrounded by open wheat fields, the kind that turn gold in summer and seem to stretch forever. And then you look up and there are these old medieval walls still standing like they're quietly watching over the place. Those walls actually have a story. Long ago, they protected merchants traveling up toward Leon. Villalpando was a huge grain trading stop for centuries. All those wheat fields around the town, they weren't just for scenery, they fed entire regions, and you can still feel a bit of that old life when you walk around. Today, life here moves slowly. About 1,400 people live in the town, and the routine is simple. Morning markets, fresh bread from the bakery, people talking in the square. One local baker told me, "The sky is our clock, everything changes with its color." And honestly, that's exactly the vibe. The day feels tied to sunlight, not schedules. And the cost of living? Wildly low. Older homes can cost $5,000 to $10,000. Rent sits around $390 a month. The whole place is about 13% cheaper than the Spanish average. It's peaceful, neighbors look out for each other, and the agricultural rhythm gives the town this grounded, honest feel. The flip side, jobs are limited, winters bite pretty hard, and you'll be driving a bit if you want some service. Now that we've already covered a lot of these Spanish towns, let's step back and compare them a bit. You start to notice something interesting. The smaller the town, the smaller the price tag. Take Valdelagua del Cerro. Only a couple dozen people live there, and some homes go for as low as a few $1,000s. That's basically buy a house for the price of a new phone territory. Move up to places like Rio Torto or Oceja de Sajambre, and the numbers still stay surprisingly low. You're looking at homes that often land in the 5 to 7,000 range, which feels unreal when you think about owning an actual stone house in Europe. Then towns with a bit more life like Mondoñedo or Villalpando creep up slightly, but even there you're still talking well under 12 grand for something you can make your own. And that's really the point. Each town has its own rhythm and landscape, but all of them share one thing: prices that feel like they've been frozen in time. If you don't mind quiet streets, slower days, and rolling up your sleeves for some repairs, Spain still has places where buying a home isn't a dream. It's a weekend decision. Now moving on to Alcaudete de la Jara, fields, footpaths, quiet days. Set in the province of Toledo, the town sits between wide plains and rolling farmland. It's rural but not cut off. You can reach larger towns in under 30 minutes. Daily life is simple: a couple of cafes, an old square, and neighbors who wave before they speak. Alcaudete grew around the old Jara Railway in the early 1900s, once a busy line for farmers and merchants. The town still celebrates its Fiesta de los Molinos, honoring its historic grain mills. Even the parish church carries a story, built and expanded in the 1500s under local architect Hernando de Villegas. Population sits around 1,600. Homes run $5,300 to $16,000, rent averages about $320, and the cost of living is roughly 18% lower than the Spanish average. You get strong internet, quiet nights, open trails, and steady basic services. But jobs are limited, summers run hot and dry, and many cheap homes need real fixing. Caudete de las Fuentes, vines, sunlight, old stones. Some places greet you with a sound or a view. Caudete greets you with a smell, the soft, warm scent of grapes resting under the afternoon sun. When the light hits the vineyards just right, the whole landscape glows a gentle gold. Set inland in Valencia, the town is wrapped in vineyards and low hills that roll out like a quiet carpet. The pace is friendly and unhurried. Wineries mark the edges of the town, and most days feel shaped by fields, small festivals, and long lunches under open sky. This land has deep roots. Just outside town sit the remains of Kellen, an ancient Iberian settlement more than 2,000 years old, where clay fragments still rise to the surface after heavy rain. And that sense of age carries into daily life, especially each fall when Caudete gathers for its historic wine harvest festival, a tradition locals say is older than anyone's great-grandfather. And the locals are proud of their history. The town's small museum displays pre-Roman tools, painted pottery, and farming pieces pulled straight from the surrounding valley, reminding visitors how long people have worked this land. Today, Caudete holds about 650 residents. Homes still go for $5,500 to $11,000, rent averages around $350, and the cost of living sits roughly 15% below the Spanish average. Wine isn't just what we make, it's how we talk, a vineyard caretaker likes to say. You get mild winters, open views, and a welcoming community. But rentals can be scarce. Most jobs revolve around farming, and buses don't run late. But if vineyards isn't your thing, the next place offers calm and connection in one surprising mix. Arcos de Jalón, stillness with a train station. Unlike the mountain towns or vineyard villages before it, Arcos carries a strange mix. Life feels still, but something is always passing through. Set in Soria along the A2 corridor between Madrid and Zaragoza, the town sits right where convenience meets calm. Streets are simple, houses low and steady, and the train station, which opened since 1862, is still its heartbeat. Above it all, the old castle of Arcos watches from the hill, a reminder of medieval days and even the strategic rail battles fought nearby during 1937. Homes stay surprisingly affordable here, usually between $4,500 and $10,000. With rent around $300 and a cost of living roughly 20% below Spain's average. There's plenty to like. Easy travel even without a car, safe streets, and a calm rhythm untouched by tourism. And yet, for all its connection, the next town, the number one in our list, manages to feel complete, almost like a tiny city hiding in plain sight. Tarazona, Moorish arches and mountain air. Some towns feel painted. Tarazona feels carved, layer by layer, into the foothills of Moncayo. When the sun drops, its terracotta rooftops and Mudéjar towers don't just glow. They almost hum, like the whole town is warming up for the night. This place has a different energy compared to the quiet villages before it. Set in Aragon, right beside Moncayo Natural Park, Tarazona mixes crisp mountain air with narrow medieval streets that twist like old stories. It's bigger too. More cafes, more morning chatter, more life happening out in the open. The old Jewish quarter leans into steep alleys, small plazas, and timbered homes that look as if they've stood through every century. And Tarazona has the history to match. Its 16th century cathedral reopened in 2011 after a 30-year restoration, revealing bright murals hidden for generations. The town's famous Cipotagado festival, rooted in the 1700s traditions, fills the streets every August with music and color. And throughout Aragon, Tarazona's Mudéjar brickwork influenced towers, arches, and facades for hundreds of years. Despite all that appeal, the housing remains shockingly reachable. When you hear $6,000 to $20,000 for a home, that's not a typo. Those are real prices for older houses that usually need updating, but give you full ownership for less than the cost of a used car. Even the more move-in ready places rarely jump into big city territory. Rent sits at about $420 a month, which means many people pay less for a whole apartment here than others do for a single room in Madrid or Barcelona. And with living costs around 10% below the national average, your daily expenses. Groceries, eating out, utilities stretch noticeably further. Tarazona works well for anyone who wants history and convenience. You get full services, shops, pharmacies, schools, real grocery stores, plus mountain trails only minutes away. Homes stay affordable, and unlike tiny shrinking towns, Tarazona feels active and lived in. So there you have it. From Rio Torto's soft green hills to Osea de Sajambre's dramatic mountain walls. From the quiet, under-the-radar charm of Alcaudete de la Jara to the slow-motion stillness of Arcos de Jalón. And finally, the story-rich streets of Tarazona. Each town has its own rhythm, its own price point, its own kind of peace. Which one pulled you in? Where could you actually see yourself staying? Or is there another place you want me to dig into? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure to like and subscribe. We've got plenty more hidden corners of Europe and the world coming your way.